The village of Ukoja was a place of peace, where laughter echoed through the marketplace, and children played under the warm sun. But everything changed when young women started dying mysteriously. Their bodies were found lifeless, with strange snake-like bite marks on their necks and arms. Fear spread like wildfire. Who or what was behind these deaths? No one knew for sure. Adana arrived in Ukoja on a warm evening to visit her aunt. She was excited to experience the village's lively festivals and bustling life. But instead of joy, she found sorrow and whispers of terror. When she learned her best friend, Nkem, was one of the victims, Adana's heart shattered. How could this happen, she wondered. People warned her to stay indoors after sunset. It's not safe, her aunt said, her voice shaking. But Adana couldn't rest. Nkem's death was too painful to ignore. She promised herself that she would find out the truth, no matter the cost. In the center of Ukoja's marketplace stood Odul, the village builder. He was tall, charming, and always had a smile on his face. Women admired his smooth voice and confident walk. He seemed perfect, too perfect. Adana noticed how people trusted him, but something about his smile felt off. Odul approached Adana one day. "You must be new here," he said, flashing his charming grin. "If you need anything, just ask." His friendliness seemed genuine, but Adana's instinct screamed otherwise. She had heard stories of Odul spending time with many of the women who later died. Could he be connected? While others admired him, Adana watched carefully, determined to uncover the truth. If Odul has secrets, she thought, I'll find them. The journey for justice had begun. Adana's first few days in Ukoja were unsettling. Everywhere she went, she overheard whispers about the mysterious deaths. Women whispered in corners, their faces pale with fear. Men spoke in hushed tones about the bite marks. Some claimed it was the wrath of the gods, while others believed a deadly snake roamed the village. Adana couldn't ignore how often Odul's name came up in these conversations. "He's always around the young women," one elder muttered. "Too friendly for my liking," said another. Adana decided to follow the rumors and gather clues. If Odul truly was hiding something, she had to be cautious. That night, Adana quietly observed him in the marketplace. He laughed and joked with a group of young women, his charm drawing them in like moths to a flame. But when one woman touched his arm, Odul stiffened, as though guarding something. Adana's suspicions grew stronger. Adana couldn't stop thinking about Nkem. Her friend had been full of life, always smiling, always laughing. But now, all that was left of her was a painful memory. Adana visited the spot where Nkem's body had been found, an overgrown path near the river. The air felt heavy, as if the ground itself mourned her death. Adana crouched down and noticed faint marks in the dirt, like something had slithered through the grass. Her heart raced. Was it a snake that killed Nkem? But how could one snake claim so many lives without being caught? Her mind flashed back to Odul. Could he have lured Nkem here? The thought made her shiver. Adana clenched her fists. "I won't let her death be in vain," she vowed. If Odul was involved, she would find proof and bring him to justice. The weight of her promise pressed heavily on her, but she refused to back down. Determined to uncover the truth, Adana decided to seek the wisdom of Ukoja's oracle. The villagers spoke of her as a powerful seer, feared and respected by all. If anyone could help Adana make sense of the strange deaths, it was the oracle. The journey to the oracle's hut was long and eerie. Adana walked through dense forests, where the trees whispered secrets with every gust of wind. When she arrived, the oracle's piercing eyes met hers. "You seek answers," the oracle said without being asked. Adana nodded. My friend was killed, and others have died the same way. I need to know who is behind this. The oracle lit incense and chanted, her voice rising like a song carried by the wind. Then she stopped, her expression grim. A man hides behind charm and beauty. But his heart is dark, and his weapon is deadly. If you want to stop him, you must face great danger. She handed Adana a wooden flute. This will control the beast, the oracle said. Use it wisely, for your courage will decide the fate of Okoja. Adana clutched the flute tightly, determined to face whatever lay ahead. With the flute hidden in her bag, Adana returned to the village and began watching Odul more closely. She saw how women gravitated toward him, entranced by his charm. He always had a warm smile and a kind word, but his eyes seemed to be hiding something. One evening, Adana followed him discreetly as he left the market. He strolled toward the outskirts of the village, humming a tune. Her heart pounded as she stayed hidden in the shadows, careful not to make a sound. Odul stopped suddenly and glanced around, his expression wary. Adana ducked behind a tree, holding her breath. What was he up to? She didn't see a snake, but something about the way Odul moved made her uneasy. For now, she decided to wait and gather more evidence. The flute in her bag reminded her she had a weapon of her own. The hunt for the truth was far from over. Adana couldn't shake the memory of following Odul. The way he glanced over his shoulder, as if guarding a secret, made her more determined to find out what he was hiding. That evening, she sought out elders in the village who might know more about the deaths. One elderly woman, Mama Ifioma, hesitated at first. But when Adana mentioned Kem's death, she sighed and leaned closer. "There's talk of a snake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not an ordinary one, but a serpent of darkness. They say it's controlled by someone. But no one knows who." Adana's heart raced. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together. Could Odul be controlling this deadly creature? The thought chilled her, but she knew she was on the right path. "Thank you, Mama Ifioma," she said, her resolve hardening. Adana decided it was time to test Odul. She approached him one afternoon as he worked on repairing a roof. "Odul," she said with a friendly smile, "I've been hearing about your skills. Can you help me fix a broken stool at my aunt's house?" Odul smiled, his charm oozing like honey. "Of course, Adana. Anything for a newcomer." The next day, he came to her aunt's house, carrying his tools. Adana watched his every move as he worked. She noticed how he kept adjusting his trousers, as though something inside was alive. Her suspicion deepened. When the stool was fixed, Adana thanked him and offered him water. "You're very kind," Odul said, his voice smooth. But Adana saw something flicker in his eyes, a guarded, calculating look. She felt certain now. Odul wasn't just a charming builder, he was the man behind the terror. That night, Adana held the flute the oracle had given her. "I need more proof," she thought. But soon Odul's secret would be exposed. Adana couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Odul's behavior in her mind. The way he adjusted his trousers, the way his charm felt forced, everything pointed to a sinister truth. She decided to act quickly before more lives were lost. Late that night, Adana crept out of her aunt's house and headed toward Odul's home. The village was silent, the air thick with unease. Her heart pounded as she crouched behind a tree near his window, watching. Inside, she saw Odul sitting alone, sharpening a knife. His movements were deliberate, his face devoid of the friendly charm he showed during the day. Suddenly, a hissing sound broke the silence. Adana froze. From Odul's lap, a serpent slithered out. It was enormous, its scales gleaming in the moonlight. Odul stroked the snake, whispering words she couldn't hear. Fear gripped Adana, but she stayed still. Now she knew for certain Odul was the killer, and the snake was his weapon. The next morning, Adana sought out Mama Ifeoma and shared what she had seen. The old woman's face turned pale. The oracle was right, she murmured. You are brave to uncover this, but how will you stop him? Adana showed Mama Ifeoma the flute. The oracle said this can control the snake. I use it to expose Odul and end his terror. Mama Ifeoma nodded but looked worried. Be careful, my child. Odul is dangerous. He won't go down easily. Adana knew the risks, but she was ready. That evening, she went to the village square, where people gathered to relax after a long day. Odul was there, laughing and charming as usual. Adana took a deep breath and began to play the flute. The melody was soft and haunting, like the wind whispering through the trees. All eyes turned to her, including Odul's. At first, he smiled, amused by the unexpected performance. But then his face changed. The snake hidden in his trousers began to stir. As Adana played the flute, the air in the square grew tense. The villagers watched, confused by the sudden performance. But Odul's expression betrayed him. His confident smile wavered, replaced by panic. The snake began to slither out of his trousers, its shiny black scales reflecting the moonlight. Gasps erupted from the crowd as they saw the enormous serpent coiling around Odul. What is this? Someone shouted. Odul tried to grab the snake, but it hissed and snapped at him, no longer under his control. Adana's flute continued to play, its eerie melody making the serpent move as if it were in a trance. He's the one. Adana shouted, her voice ringing out. He's been using this snake to kill. The villagers recoiled in horror. Women who once admired Odul now looked at him with disgust and fear. Odul stumbled backward, desperately trying to regain control of the creature, but it was too late. Odul realized his secret was exposed. Lies, he yelled, his voice trembling. She's bewitched you all. But his panic only made him more suspicious. The villagers closed in on him, demanding answers. Without warning, Odul turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness with the snake trailing behind him. Adana stopped playing the flute, knowing she had done enough to reveal the truth. But her task wasn't over yet. We can't let him escape, she cried. A group of young men from the village grabbed torches and followed her lead. They chased Odul into the dense forest, where the air was thick with the sound of rustling leaves and distant animal calls. Adana held the flute tightly, knowing it was her only weapon against the serpent. As they ran deeper into the woods, they spotted Odul ahead, struggling to control the snake that now seemed to turn against him. Adana felt a surge of determination. This was her chance to end the nightmare once and for all. The forest grew darker as Adana and the villagers chased Odul. The torches cast eerie shadows on the trees, making the night feel alive. Ahead, Odul stumbled, yelling commands at the serpent. The snake hissed, no longer obedient. Adana stepped forward, raising the flute to her lips. She played a soft, haunting tune that echoed through the forest. The snake paused, its head swaying to the rhythm. Odul turned, his face twisted with fear. Stop, he screamed. You don't know what you're doing. But Adana didn't stop. The melody grew louder, and the serpent began to uncoil from Odul, moving toward her. The villagers stood frozen, unsure whether to fear the snake or admire Adana's bravery. Adana, be careful. Mama Ifeoma's voice called from the back. But Adana was focused. The flute gave her control, and she wouldn't let the snake harm anyone else. Realizing he was losing his grip on the situation, Odul lunged toward Adana. You ruin everything, he shouted, his face contorted in desperation. But before he could reach her, the snake turned on him. With a sharp hiss, the serpent struck at Odul, its fangs grazing his arm. He cried out in pain and stumbled backward. Adana kept playing, guiding the snake away from the villagers and back toward its master. "Please, stop," Odul begged, his charm completely gone. "I leave the village, I'll never return." But Adana didn't falter. She thought of Nkem and the other innocent women whose lives he had stolen. This was justice. The snake crawled tighter around Odul, and his screams echoed through the forest. The villagers watched, their fear replaced with grim satisfaction. "He used the snake to harm others," one man whispered. "Now it's turned against him." Adana played one final note, and the serpent struck. Odul fell silent, his reign of terror finally over. The forest grew still, and the villagers let out a collective sigh of relief. The nightmare was over. The villagers stood in stunned silence, their torches flickering as the forest returned to its natural quiet. The massive snake slithered away into the shadows, its presence no longer tied to Odul's dark will. Adana lowered the flute, her hands trembling. She felt both relief and sorrow, relief that the terror was over, and sorrow for the lives that had been lost. One by one, the villagers gathered around her. "You saved us," a woman said, her voice choked with gratitude. "You ended the nightmare." Mama Ifeoma placed a comforting hand on Adana's shoulder. "You showed great courage, my child. Okoja owes you a debt that can never be repaid." Adana nodded, but her heart felt heavy. "It was for Nkem," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her loss. "And for all the women who deserve justice." The villagers carried Odul's lifeless body back to the square. There, they decided to bury him far away from the village, a grim reminder of the dangers of deceit and unchecked charm. Adana returned to the oracle's hut the next day, the flute in hand. She bowed before the seer, her face solemn. "It's done," she said. "Odul is no more." The oracle smiled faintly. "You have proven yourself, Adana. You faced evil with wisdom and bravery. The flute has served its purpose, and now it must be returned." Adana handed over the flute, feeling a strange sense of closure. The oracle placed it in a sacred box and said, "The power of the flute is not for ordinary hands. Only those with pure intentions can wield it. You were chosen because your heart is strong." Adana thanked the oracle and prepared to leave. As she stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the village in warm light. It felt like a sign that Okoja could finally heal. Walking back, Adana thought of her journey. She hadn't just fought for justice, she had also grown stronger, wiser, and more determined. The village would remember this tale, and her name would stand as a beacon of hope and courage. In the weeks that followed, the village of Okoja slowly began to heal. With Odul's dark presence gone, the air felt lighter, and the villagers resumed their daily lives. Yet, the scars of his actions remained. Women who had once admired his charm now carried a shared grief for the friends and daughters they had lost. Adana, though hailed as a hero, spent her days quietly helping others. She visited the families of the victims, offering comfort and sharing memories of their loved ones. They would never be forgotten, she promised them. Her words brought solace to many, but she knew the pain would linger for a long time. Mama Ifeoma encouraged the villagers to hold a ceremony to honor those who had died. At the event, Adana stood before the crowd, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "We must learn from this," she said. "Evil often hides behind a kind face, but together, we can protect one another and ensure it never returns." The village took Adana's words to heart. They became more united, watching out for one another and listening to the voices of women and children, who were often ignored in the past. Okoja was changing, and it was for the better. Adana found herself becoming a symbol of strength and wisdom in the village. Young girls looked up to her, inspired by her bravery. Parents began teaching their children about the importance of trust and the dangers of blind admiration. Though Adana could have returned to her home village, she chose to stay in Okoja. "This is my home now," she said when asked. "I feel a bond with these people. Together, we've faced darkness and found light." As time passed, Adana became a leader in the village. Her wisdom guided Okoja through challenges, and her courage became a story mothers told their daughters, encouraging them to be bold and unyielding in the face of danger. Years passed, and the village of Okoja flourished. The horrors of the past faded into memory, but Adana's legacy remained strong. She continued to help guide the village, always leading with kindness, wisdom, and strength. The flute, once a symbol of justice and victory, was kept in the village shrine, a reminder of the day when a young woman stood up against evil and changed the fate of many. Adana's name was passed down through generations, told in stories around the fire. Children sang songs about the brave woman who had freed them from the terror of Odul. The tale of the serpent and the flute became part of Okoja's folklore, and it was a story the villagers never forgot. Adana, now older, often visited the graves of the victims, offering flowers and prayers. She could never forget Nkem and the others who had lost their lives, but she found peace knowing she had honored them with her actions. One afternoon, Adana sat by the river, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Her heart was at peace, knowing that Okoja was safe and thriving. She had given everything for this village, and in return, it had given her a sense of purpose, of belonging. As the breeze rustled through the trees, Adana closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the years lift from her shoulders. She thought of Nkem, her best friend, whose spirit had always been with her during the darkest moments. "We did it, Nkem," Adana whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. "Okoja is free." And so, the legend of Adana continued, not just as a tale of victory, but as a reminder of the power of courage, wisdom, and love. Her story would never fade, just as the light of the setting sun never truly disappears, but lingers in the hearts of those who remember.